Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we got a new build guide video for you. This one is Facebreaker Cyclone, pushing north of 100 million shaper DPS. It is an absolute terror on bosses, and it's got some pretty good map potential as well. If you like what you see, please don't hesitate to drop a subscribe, maybe ring the bell for notifications, and if you really want to support us out, just come check us out at twitch.tv/sniper1232. Link in the description below. Alright, let's go ahead and see what we got in store. Alright, let's go ahead and dig into the map. So what I'm doing here is I'm showing you the sextons that we have on the map, as well as all the scarabs real quick. So it's a semi-juiced T16 map. And let's go ahead and get started. So this build absolutely demolishes bosses in the game. It's a very strong mapper, but it's not going to be as effective as if you were a dual wielding character, just due to the AoE that you're going to lose out on, as well as some of the other quality of life that you get. Right there, showed you the Pantheons. We are going to be taking Soul of Shikari and Soul of Lunaris. Alright, so as you can see, our mobility skill we're going to be using is Dash with Second Wind. It's the only really good movement skill we can use since we're technically an unarmed build. We can't use Leap Slam, we can't use Whirling Blades. But when you get a high level one linked with Second Wind, you're actually pretty nimble around the map. So as you see, we just demolish the packs that we run through. We don't have the greatest AoE, but it's still effective enough. I mean, we're looking at a T16 fully pumped up with Sextons, jam-packed with monsters, and we're just cutting through it like a lawnmower. No real issues. We want to make sure that we have our rallying cry up 24/7. You only need to cast that or activate that once every 28 seconds, and then you want to be using your enduring cry 24/7, so you'll as you can see, it's going off on cooldown, and that's generating us a ton of rage as well as our attacks. So for a little extra movement speed, you can pop Berserk, as well as making sure that you have your Blood Rage rolling for the Frenzy charges. So you're actually pretty quick for, just being a unarmed build. Now you can see here, what the build is doing is just like disgusting how it just shreds through everything. Like, you don't have to hover over anything. One pass through any monster is enough to destroy it. So coming up here, we got the boss. We're just going to drop our totem, pop Berserk. There goes the bosses. They're done. Like I said, just one pass, and it's cleaned up. We'll go down here, and we'll pop a Metamorph here in a second. Finish clearing out the Delirium. As you can see, we reached, tier 7 on Delirium. 5, 1, and 1 without any issues. Go ahead and pop a Metamorph. Treat it like you would any other boss. Put your totem on the ground. And spin to win. Alright, let's go ahead and break that gear down. This build sees numbers easily of 100 million shaper DPS under ideal situations in Path of Building. So let's go ahead and break down what we got here. We got Facebreakers. Perfect Fizz roll with a corrupted attacks modifier. So you're going to want to get yourself a pair of 797s plus. Keep your eye out for some good corruptions out there. A lot of people corrupt these. So you could get attacks, you could get vuln, different implicits that you could be kind of trying to snag if they're out there on the market. Next up, we got Raslotha's Coil. When we're doing bosses, Raslotha's Coil is the best in slot. There is really no beating this belt. I was able to pick up one with Pride has increased Orb effect. There's not going to be many of these out there, and unfortunately the person who corrupted this did not quality it first. So try to find yourself a really nice Raslotha's Coil with the highest possible more physical damage roll and the lowest possible less minimum damage roll. The rolls really do matter. If you have pretty much, a very big budget, when you're doing maps, you can literally slap Headhunter in there and you can zoom through all the maps. Alright, next up, you get yourself a pair of two-tone boots. Resistances are really tight in this build. I crafted these myself. These are amazing. You want Tailwind, Elusive. It's going to give you some speed, some crit, all sorts of good stuff on this. Try to get yourself some intel, dex, whatever primary stat that you're missing. These boots are pretty much mandatory. If you can score some movement speed, even better. They get very pricey with movement speed and life, so you might have to like make a judgment call on what stat you want to prioritize the most. All right, next up are rings. We're going to use at least one Circle of Guilt. If you can use 2 of these, go for it. I wasn't able to make it work with the resistances that I wanted to achieve. I wanted at least 75% resistances on everything. Now, make sure you get increased buff effect and then increased physical damage while using Herald of Purity. So, very important. The nice thing about this ring, there's a plethora of them out there. They range anywhere from 9x to, you know, infinite amounts of money, depending on what the implicits are. This one had a nice 7% life roll, so I picked it up. The other ring, if you're not going to use another Circle of Guilt, get yourself an Assassin's Mark ring. This is just a junk ring. Really doesn't do anything special except for provide Assassin's Mark, some dex and int. But make sure you're getting steel bases. I can't emphasize that enough. The flat physical damage is what makes this build scale insanely. You want steel rings. There's really no other way to say flat fizz is your numero uno stat. Okay, moving on to our amulet. This is, you have no option but this amulet right here. The only roll that matters is that top roll, crit strike multiplier. There's no other amulet that we can use for this build. All right, the chest. We want a minus mana chest, so our Cyclone is free, as well as some resistances and some life. And I chose to go with the Explode mod just because it makes mapping feel much more smooth, like you saw in the map demo that we did a little earlier. That, you know, it just makes it feel that buttery smooth when you start chaining those explosions together. It really feels good. So, helm, you have tons of options here. The numero uno stat that I recommend, I keep saying that over and over again, I don't know why, but the most important is your enchant needs to be Berserk has increased buff effect. Since we're doing so much damage while under Berserk, and we'll have so much uptime with Berserk because of how much rage we're generating, you need to have this. You could go with the rage has a less decay rate while under Berserk, but I highly, highly recommend this. I decided to give Devotos a try just because the build, being a Cyclone player, it is a little slower, and that extra 20% movement speed is very noticeable. So you could use this. You could use a Dead Bellow helmet. If you can find one with the Berserk enchant, they're very expensive, but they add a lot of flat fizz and some stats. So they are super nice. They are more damage than the Devotos, less mobility. If you want to be the tooltip warrior, slap an Abyssus on and you'll be well north of 120 million damage on this build. I do have an Abyssus. I tried it. It's disgusting, but we already have so much DPS that the extra damage taken just didn't seem to be justifiable to me. So I tried out some different helmets and I kind of settled on Devotos. Next up, our shield. This is just a giant resistance slot. If by some miracle you're able to achieve resistances and you don't need a big shield with a bunch of resistances on, you could use the Great Old Ward, add some flat fizz. Like I said, flat fizz, flat fizz, flat fizz is the #1 stat. So I went with this helmet because it has a huge minus mana reservation, which allowed me to sneak in Blood and Sand into my build, as well as using Pride and all the other goodies. We'll go over the gem links a little later, but because of that minus mana reservation, I was able to sneak in quite a bit of more mana effectiveness with my auras, so I was able to be a little more greedy. And then also our flask, we're using a diamond, a Bottled Faith if you can afford it, a Lion's Roar, and a Cinder Swallow with crit, and just an instant bleed flask. Other pieces of gear that you're gonna need are, if you can afford it, you're going to want to get yourself a nice Watcher's Eye. The primary thing we're looking for is Impale's last 2 additional hits while using Pride. If you can get another stat to go with it, it's just a huge bonus. You don't need it, but it's just the more you spin, the more you're going to get. Our jewels that we are looking for any jewel that has crit multi, life, you know, flat fizz. We can also use flat fizz to claws since we're using that the unique amulet. And then we're also looking for, let's see if I can show you one. Yeah, here's one that has claws to attacks. So this one works perfect. It's got 4 stats that are all usable: the life, the flat fizz, the crit multi, the crit chance. So that's going to be kind of your items that you're going to need. I'll go over the cluster jewels in when we go over the passive tree. But the last item you're going to need is a Transcendent Flesh. You want to sock it here because it just gives you a ton of crit multiplier. So it's just a really great slot. It plugs in real nice right here. And that about wraps up the gear. Next, we're going to break down the gems and the links. So stay tuned for that. Alright, let's break down the gem links real quick. So what we got going on is Cyclone, linked with Impale, linked with AoE, linked with Infused Channeling, Awakened Brutality, and Fortify. Now, this is your map clearing setup. When you are going to do just a pure dedicated boss like Cyrus, Uber Elder, whichever it may be, you're going to drop the Fortify for Awakened Melee Fizz, and you're going to drop the increased AoE with Consecrated Effects. Alright, next up, in our glove slot, we got Berserk, linked with Precision, linked with Enlighten, linked with Warbanner. Alright, moving on, we have our helmet, which is going to be holding all our shouts, our war cries. So Enduring Cry, linked with Empower, linked with Rallying Cry, and Blood Rage. You can swap out, whatever you want with Blood Rage, but the important thing is to have the 3 links here: Empower, Enduring Cry, and Rallying Cry, just to give them those extra levels. Alright, next up in our shield, we got Pride, linked with Herald of Purity, linked with Enlighten. Now this shield gives minus 15% reserved mana, so it makes our Pride and our Herald of Purity very cheap to reserve mana. If you don't end up using a reserved mana chest, you probably will not be able to use Blood and Sand in your setup. Alright, last up, we got our Ancestral War Chief that we drop on bosses that just gives us a ton of damage. And then we have Blood and Sand, Second Wind, and Dash. So this is our movement utility slots. All of these will be shown in Path of Building that is linked in the description below as well. Alright, let's go ahead and break down our passive tree. As you can see, we are hitting numbers north of 100 million DPS. That is without using an Abyssus. If we plug an Abyssus in there, we're looking at over 124 million damage. And I can show you that real quick. 154 million damage with an Abyssus, but the survivability takes a huge hit with that. So you're more than welcome to use it for them bosses, but I chose the Votos just because of the movement speed and the quality of life that it presents with taking a little less damage. So we're going to be taking Crave the Slaughter and Rite of Ruin, Warbringer, and Aspect of Carnage. I recommend you take them in those orders as you are leveling up your build. Alright, so what we're going to do is, first things first, we're going to get our life. We're going to come down this part of the tree. We'll run over here, grab Art of the Gladiator, work our way down to our first cluster nodes. Alright, so for our first cluster node, we want to get ourselves a nice large jewel that has 8 to 9 passive skills on it. It needs to have deep cuts and vicious skewering and 2 sockets. Those are, the best outcome that we could ask for. Why do you ask? Because vicious skewering is going to give us 10% chance to impale enemies on hits with attacks, which means we no longer need to use Dread Banner. We can use War Banner for even more damage instead of having to run Dread Banner. All right, you obviously want the 2 jewel slots so you can get 2 medium clusters to come off of it. But then the other note I mentioned was deep cuts. This is an impale build. We want to stack as many impales as possible. Deep cuts just flat out gives you 1 more impale. So we have a Megalomaniac that we are running for another deep cuts, another impale, and Hexbringer. I recommend if you can find something like this or something similar, do that. The most important thing is to get deep cuts on your Megalomaniac, because you can only get deep cuts on large jewels, and we don't want to be running a bunch of large jewels because they'll just eat up so many passive points. But Hexbreaker was a nice bonus. We're immune to curses while we're cycloning, which is basically 90% of the map. And then for your medium jewels, you're going to be looking for Cry Wolf on every single jewel, as well as either Warning Call, and you'll need 1 jewel that has Cry Wolf and Mob Mentality. I'll show you that in a second. But we're going to take all those nodes, and then we're going to get ourselves a jewel slot at the end, where we're just going to plug in either a damage jewel, a life jewel, or a mixture of damage, life, and resistances. All my jewels are listed in the path of building, so you can kind of check out what I'm using. So to show you the other medium jewel that we are looking for Mob Mentality. This is what gives us 5 rage every time we use a shout, and we're constantly shouting with either Enduring Cry or Rallying Cry. So you want that set up. And then again, Cry Wolf, Warning Call, Cry Wolf, Warning Call for crit multi, and stacking up Cry Wolves. The reason why we're doing a bunch of Cry Wolves is if we go into our configuration tab, you can say the number of nearby enemies, depending on how many Cry Wolves you have, is either 50, 40, or whatever amount. You know, if we take off 0 nearby enemies, we lose like 30% of our damage. But we'll always have those enemies around because of the Cry Wolves. So now this is the semi-expensive part. So this build is in its current state not budget friendly. I put a lot of money into this build to get it where it's at. I'm using a 5 passive voices, which at the time I bought it was 26 exalts. You could easily use a 7-point voices, but you're gonna waste a bunch more passives. And if you're gonna do that, I would just recommend running another large cluster jewel instead of using a 7 points passives, just because of how much it wastes. All right, so as for the rest of our passive tree, we're picking up as much crit multi as we can, as well as some more impale effects, as well as some crit. We want that maim on crit chance that Dismembering offers. We're gonna run up the Scion life wheel, grab some life. This tree is set up for level 98. My character is 98, so if you get a little less, maybe you have to peel some life, maybe you have to peel some crit. The build does struggle with Dex and Int, so you'll need to pick that up on your gear as you go. Unfortunately, I was forced into 1 slot on the Intelligence, so we try to avoid that at all cost if we can. But that is the passive tree in a nutshell. Here's all the gear that I was using. More than welcome to take a look at that. And that pretty much concludes the passive tree and the path of building section. Thanks again for checking out the video for Facebreaker Cyclone. If you guys need anything whatsoever, whether it's help on the build guide, min-maxing, crafting, don't hesitate to either drop a comment or swing by the Twitch channel. I'd be more than happy to help you out. Again, thank you so much for the support. Words can't describe how much it means to me, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next video.